They tore down my bridge, thinking I'd just roll over and sell my family farm for pennies. But they had no idea who they were messing with. Want to see how I took down an entire corrupt HOA empire and reclaimed our community from their iron grip? The sound of splintering would stopped me in my tracks. I dropped my grocery bags and ran toward the creek, my boots skidding on the muddy path. 3 men in yellow vests were smashing my bridge with sledgehammers while a woman in a crisp pantsuit stood watching, arms crossed and nodding with satisfaction. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" I shouted, sliding down the embankment. "That's my property." The woman turned, her pearl necklace catching the afternoon light. "Mr. Marshall, I presume?" "I'm Eleanor Harrington, president of the Sycamore Heights Homeowners Association. This structure violates our community standards." I stared at her in disbelief. "This bridge is on my land. My family has owned this farm for 4 generations, long before your fancy neighborhood existed." Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Our survey indicates the creek is the property line, and structures crossing it require HOA approval." She handed me a paper with official-looking stamps. "You'll find everything in order." My hands shook as I scanned the document. Something wasn't right. Last year, when I built the bridge, I checked all the property maps. The creek cut through my land entirely, with the property line running 10 feet beyond it. "This is wrong," I said. "Your survey is wrong." One of the workers nudged another. "Told you he'd be trouble." Eleanor sighed like I was a child having a tantrum. "Mr. Marshall, we understand change is difficult for traditional properties like yours, but Sycamore Heights has standards to maintain, property values to protect." Behind her, my neighbor Diane peered over her fence, phone raised, clearly recording everything. She'd complained last month about my tractor being an eyesore when I drove it across the bridge to reach my back field. "I'll need to see the original survey," I said firmly, "and you need to stop destroying my property right now." "The work order is approved and paid for," Eleanor replied, checking her watch. "If you have concerns, you can bring them to our next board meeting. First Tuesday of the month, 7 p.m. sharp. Residents only, of course." She emphasized the last part, reminding me I wasn't one of them. By now, the bridge was half demolished. My heart sank watching each board crack and fall into the creek. That bridge wasn't just a way to cross water. It was something I'd built with my own hands, using wood from trees my grandfather had planted. "This isn't over," I warned. Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me with newfound interest. "Actually, Mr. Marshall, since you're here, my associate has been meaning to contact you." She handed me a business card. "Sycamore Development Group, my husband's company. They're very interested in discussing the future of your quaint little farm." The pieces clicked together in my mind. "So that's what this is about. You want my land." "We want progress, Mr. Marshall. Growth. Your obsolete farm sits at the edge of a thriving community. Surely you've noticed how out of place you've become." I pocketed the card. "My family survived the Great Depression on this land, Mrs. Harrington. We survived drought, flood, and everything in between. We'll survive you too." Her smile tightened. "We'll see." As she walked away, I noticed something that sent a chill through me. Mounted on Diane's fence post was a small camera, angled directly at my property. When had that been installed? And who was watching? That evening, I spread old property maps across my kitchen table, comparing them with county records I'd pulled up online. Something was definitely wrong with the survey Eleanor had shown me. According to every document I had, the creek was firmly on my property. A knock at the door interrupted my research. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not after dark. My porch light illuminated an older man in a rumpled suit. His car parked at the end of my driveway. "Mr. Marshall?" "Frank Cooper. I was Sycamore Heights surveyor until last month." He glanced nervously over his shoulder. "May I come in? I think you should know what they're planning for your land." I opened the door wider, my mind racing. "How did you know about my situation?" "Word travels fast," he said, stepping inside. "Especially when someone finally stands up to Eleanor Harrington." Frank's story chilled me to the bone. The HOA wasn't just after my bridge. They wanted my entire farm. The creek demolition was just the first move in their campaign to pressure me into selling. Worse, they'd falsified survey documents to claim portions of my property, starting with the creek. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Frank looked down at his hands. "They fired me when I refused to sign off on the fake survey. Been working for the county 30 years without a blemish on my record. I'm not starting now." After Frank left, I couldn't sleep. From my bedroom window, I could see the lights of Sycamore Heights glowing beyond the tree line. In the distance, the half-demolished bridge looked like a wounded animal in the moonlight. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number. Backing down would be wisest. These people get what they want one way or another." Who was watching me? Who had my number? I pulled my curtains closed, suddenly feeling exposed in my own home. The next morning, I discovered they'd gone further than destroying my bridge. Someone had dumped trash along my side of the creek, old furniture, broken appliances, garbage bags split open with their contents scattered across my field. As I began cleaning up the mess, I noticed Diane watching from her deck again, coffee cup in hand. When she saw me looking, she quickly went inside. I had just loaded the last of the trash into my pickup when a county vehicle pulled into my driveway. A young woman in a uniform approached with a clipboard. "Mr. Marshall? I'm here about an environmental complaint. Illegal dumping in a waterway?" My mouth fell open. "You're kidding me. I didn't dump this. I've been cleaning it up." She looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we have photographic evidence submitted this morning showing you disposing of materials in the creek." "That's impossible," I said, but then remembered Diane and her camera. They were framing me. The officer wrote me a citation, a $5,000 fine for watershed contamination. As she drove away, my phone buzzed again. "Board meeting tomorrow. We'll discuss a fair price for your troublesome property." I crumpled the citation in my fist. They thought they could bully me off my land with false claims and harassment? They had no idea who they were dealing with. My grandfather hadn't raised a quitter. That night I made 2 calls. First to my old college roommate who'd become an environmental lawyer. Then to my cousin who worked for the regional newspaper. If Eleanor wanted a fight, she was about to get one. But as I looked out at the darkened creek and the ruins of my bridge, a disturbing question kept me awake. How far would the Sycamore Heights HOA go to get what they wanted? The county courthouse buzzed with whispers as I pushed through the double doors. Finding the property records department wasn't easy in the maze of hallways, but I was determined. 3 days had passed since the bridge incident, and I needed answers before facing Eleanor at the HOA meeting. "Can I help you?" asked an elderly clerk, peering over reading glasses. "I need to see the original property survey for my farm and the adjacent Sycamore Heights development," I explained, sliding my ID across the counter. 20 minutes later, I hunched over a large table covered with maps and documents, my finger tracing boundary lines that confirmed what I already knew. The creek ran through my property, with the actual border at least 10 feet beyond it. Eleanor's survey was a fake. My cell phone vibrated. A text from Frank Cooper. "Be careful at records office. H watches county employees. Too late for warnings." I'd already found what I needed: original documents showing that not only was the bridge entirely on my land, but Sycamore Heights had gradually encroached on boundary properties over the years through reinterpretations of survey lines. As I left the courthouse, a sleek black SUV idled across the street. The tinted window rolled down just enough for me to glimpse Eleanor's husband, Thomas Harrington, watching me. Message received. I was being followed. Back at the farm, I found more unwelcome surprises. Someone had placed stakes with orange flags along a new property line that cut 20 feet into my land. Beside them stood a county zoning notice, future site of Sycamore Heights Expansion Phase 4. They weren't just taking my bridge. They were claiming pieces of my farm without purchase or permission. I yanked the signs out and threw them into my truck bed. This wasn't legal. Couldn't be legal. Yet somehow they'd gotten official-looking permits and county approvals. "Taking down government property is a crime," called Diane from her yard. She'd become Eleanor's shadow, always watching, always reporting. Falsifying property lines is a bigger one, I shot back. Diane smiled thinly. The Harringtons play golf with Judge Bennett every Saturday. Who do you think he'll believe? A respected developer or a? She looked me up and down. Dirt farmer. Her words stung more than I cared to admit. In my worn jeans and work boots, I didn't look like someone who could take on wealthy developers with political connections. But appearances can be deceiving. Before becoming a full-time farmer after my dad's heart attack, I'd earned an engineering degree and worked at a major construction company. I understood development plans, water rights, and zoning laws. Knowledge that was about to come in very handy. That evening, as promised, I attended the Sycamore Heights HOA meeting. The community center was packed with residents in expensive casual wear, all turning to stare as I entered. Eleanor, at the podium, faltered mid-sentence. "Mr. Marshall, this is a private meeting for Sycamore Heights residents only," she announced, regaining composure. I held up the counterfeit survey. "Since you've decided my creek is actually your property, I figured that makes me a resident." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Many looked confused. Clearly, they hadn't been told about the aggressive expansion tactics. "We have a full agenda tonight," Eleanor said tightly. "Your concerns will have to wait for another time." An older gentleman in the front row stood up. "I'd like to hear what he has to say. My backyard also borders that farm, and I've had surveyors in my yard without permission." Eleanor's face flushed. "Marcus, we've discussed the expansion planning privately." "You discussed it with me," Marcus interrupted. "Not with the whole neighborhood. Let him speak." Other voices joined in, and Eleanor reluctantly gave me 3 minutes at the microphone. I laid out the facts simply. The falsified surveys, the illegal property markers, the destroyed bridge that was entirely on my land. I explained how the creek had been diverted slightly over the years to create the illusion of a different property line. "Many of you are new to Sycamore Heights," I concluded. "You may not realize that when this development was first built 15 years ago, it was half its current size. Each expansion has involved similar tactics against surrounding properties." The room erupted in questions. Homeowners who'd been told their high HOA fees were for community improvements now realized they'd been funding aggressive land acquisition. Some had experienced their own battles with the board over minor violations while Eleanor ignored these major ethical breaches. Eleanor banged her gavel repeatedly. "This is fear-mongering. Mr. Marshall is upset about progress and trying to turn us against each other." Her husband Thomas stood up from the back row. "What my wife means is that Sycamore Development ensures all acquisitions are fully legal and properly documented. If there have been misunderstandings about property lines, we're happy to review them." His smooth response calmed some residents, but others continued to look troubled. I'd planted seeds of doubt, exactly as I'd intended. As the meeting adjourned, Thomas approached me with an outstretched hand and a tight smile. "You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest, Marshall. Impressive. I'm authorized to offer you 20% above market value for your farm. One-time offer. Expires tomorrow noon." I didn't take his hand. "The property's not for sale. Everything has a price," he said, dropping his hand. "By fighting us, you're just driving yours down." Outside in the parking lot, Marcus caught up with me. "I'm not the only one bothered by the Harringtons' methods," he said quietly. "There's a group of us meeting tomorrow night at my house. Sunset Drive, number 42. Come around back." Hope flickered inside me. Allies within Sycamore Heights itself? That could change everything. The next morning dawned with fresh trouble. During the night, someone had diverted the creek using sandbags and plastic sheeting, flooding my lower field where I just planted winter wheat. The water rose dangerously close to my barn foundation. As I worked frantically to redirect the water, a county water management truck pulled up. The same officer who'd given me the dumping citation stepped out, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Marshall, we've received complaints about unauthorized water diversion." I gestured wildly at the floating sandbags. "I'm not diverting it. I'm trying to fix whoever did this." She shook her head. The complaint says you've been altering the creek bed for years, which is affecting drainage in Sycamore Heights. Another citation. Another fine I couldn't afford. As she drove away, I noticed Thomas Harrington watching from the edge of my property, his expression smug. My phone buzzed with his text. Noon deadline approaching. Offer drops 10% with each citation. I was being squeezed from all sides. Financially, legally, emotionally. They expected me to give up, to fold under pressure and sell at a discount. Then my land would become more luxury homes with manicured lawns and HOA-approved fences. But first, I needed to save my wheat field and barn from flooding. As I hauled the last sandbag away from the creek, Diane appeared at her fence. "Shame about your crops," she called, not sounding sorry at all. "Eleanor's hosting a barbecue this weekend to celebrate breaking ground on Phase 4. Right where your sad little bridge used to be." I straightened up, mud-covered and exhausted. "There won't be any groundbreaking, Diane. Not on my land." She laughed. "The permits are already approved. It's happening, like it or not." Something inside me hardened. I tried being reasonable. I tried working through proper channels. Now it was time for a different approach. That evening, I drove to Marcus's house in Sycamore Heights, parking a block away and walking through backyards as instructed. In his basement, I found 15 residents gathered, all with their own stories of HOA bullying, suspicious permits, and Harrington pressure tactics. "We've been compiling evidence for months," said Marcus, spreading documents across a table. "Falsified minutes, financial discrepancies, permit irregularities. But we needed a catalyst, someone willing to stand up publicly." A woman named Margaret, whose historic home had been fined repeatedly for non-conforming architecture, handed me a thick folder. Property records for every expansion phase. Notice how each one followed the same pattern: harass, cite, devalue, purchase. For the first time since my bridge came down, I felt real hope. I wasn't facing the Harringtons alone anymore. Tomorrow at dawn, I told them, they're planning to break ground on my property without my permission. Anyone free to witness what happens next. Marcus smiled. We wouldn't miss it for the world. As I walked back to my truck, I spotted a familiar black SUV parked down the street. Thomas Harrington stepped out, blocking my path. "Making friends won't save your farm, Marshall," he said quietly. "I own half the county commissioners and the building department. By this time tomorrow, bulldozers will be rolling whether you've sold to me or not." I met his gaze steadily. "We'll see about that." In the darkness of my truck, I made one final call to my cousin at the newspaper. "Sam, I need a photographer at my farm at 6 a.m. and tell them to bring a zoom lens." The Harringtons thought they had all the power. They were about to learn a painful lesson about underestimating a determined farmer with nothing left to lose. My phone rang at 6 a.m. "Mr. Marshall? My name is Margaret Thompson. We need to talk about Eleanor Harrington and that bridge of yours." I nearly hung up until she added, "They did the same thing to me last month." An hour later, Margaret's vintage Volvo pulled into my driveway. She stepped out wearing gardening gloves and carrying a folder stuffed with papers. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and behind her glasses, her eyes burned with a fighter's spirit. "My Victorian home has stood for 112 years, she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "Now I get weekly fines for architectural noncompliance, because my purple trim doesn't match their approved color palette." I poured us both coffee. "What does this have to do with my bridge?" "Everything." She pointed to a map. "See this? I've marked every property the HOA has targeted in the last 3 years. Notice a pattern? The marks formed a ring around the edges of Sycamore Heights, all bordering non-HOA properties like mine." "You're not their first victim," Margaret said. "Just their newest one." My coffee went cold as she showed me photos of other properties. The Rodriguez family's demolished treehouse, the Patel's garden statues thrown in a dumpster, old Mr. Jenkins' classic car collection forced into storage. "They pushed Jenkins so hard he sold his place for half its value last year," Margaret explained. "Guess who bought it through a shell company? Eleanor's husband's development firm. I stared at her. That can't be legal. It's not, she confirmed. But they're careful. They use the HOA rules as weapons, making life unbearable until people give up and sell. I grabbed my truck keys. Let's go talk to these folks. By sunset, my living room was packed with neighbors I'd never met. The Rodriguezes brought homemade empanadas. The Patels arrived with photo albums documenting the gradual harassment. 3 elderly residents who could barely climb my porch steps came with stacks of HOA violation notices for ridiculous infractions like excessive bird feeder activity. My children cried for days after they tore down the treehouse, Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly. It was their grandfather's last project before he died. Mr. Patel adjusted his glasses. When I questioned the removal of our garden deities, Eleanor said our ethnic decorations didn't align with community standards. The stories continued as darkness fell. Someone lit my fireplace. Rain began to drum on the roof. They flooded your field deliberately, said a man named Frank who worked for the water district. I've been watching them alter drainage patterns for years, but my supervisor won't investigate. He plays golf with Eleanor's husband. Margaret unrolled a large county property map across my floor. I've been researching at the county records office. Look at the original boundaries of Sycamore Heights. We gathered around with flashlights. The original development was much smaller than its current footprint. They've been quietly expanding their jurisdiction, she explained, tracing boundaries with her finger, adding properties that never legally joined the HOA, including parts of your farm, Mr. Marshall. Thunder cracked outside as if emphasizing her point. Lightning illuminated my window panes, casting our shocked faces in stark white light. Wait, I said, pointing to signatures on an annexed property document. That's not my father's handwriting. They forged his signature 3 years ago while he was in the hospital. The room fell silent. What we were uncovering wasn't just petty neighborhood bullying. It was organized fraud. Eleanor is running for city council next month, Mr. Patel said softly. If she wins. I didn't need him to finish. We all understood the implications. Their reach would extend beyond Sycamore Heights. There's more, Margaret added, pulling out her laptop. Eleanor's husband's development company has plans filed with the county. Once they acquire enough adjacent properties, including yours, Mr. Marshall, they're building a luxury resort complex. On her screen, architectural renderings showed gleaming buildings where our homes currently stood. My centuries-old farmhouse was replaced by a golf course. My daughter works at the bank, whispered Mrs. Tompkins, an elderly woman I'd helped with grocery deliveries during snowstorms. She says they've secured nearly $50 million in financing. They're just waiting to finish acquiring the land. The room erupted with angry voices, everyone talking at once. Some wanted to sell immediately and escape. Others suggested lawsuits we couldn't afford. A few proposed confronting Eleanor directly. I walked to my window, watching lightning strike over my flooded fields. The farm that had been in my family for generations would be underwater if I didn't act fast, both literally and financially. Listen, I said, turning to face the room. The conversations quieted. They expect us to fight alone. That's how they've beaten everyone so far, picking us off one by one. Faces turned toward me, some hopeful, others doubtful. But what can we do against their money and connections? Asked Mr. Rodriguez. I smiled for the first time in days. What do farmers do when storm clouds gather? We don't run inside. We prepare. On my dining table, I spread out blank paper. Each of you has a piece of this puzzle. Margaret has legal knowledge. Frank understands the water systems. The Patels have documentation of harassment. Mrs. Rodriguez's brother works at the newspaper, right? She nodded, surprised I remembered. Together, we have everything we need, I continued. Money and power aren't the only kinds of strength. Sometimes the truth is enough, if we can prove it. For the next 3 hours, we built our plan. Tasks were assigned. Research targets identified. Resources pooled. As the meeting broke up, Margaret lingered behind. You know she'll come after you harder now, she warned. Once Eleanor realizes we're organizing. I nodded, walking her to her car as the rain finally stopped. Stars peeked through breaking clouds. Better me than someone else, I replied. My farm may be mortgaged to the hilt, but I've got one thing the others don't. What's that? Margaret asked. I pointed to the muddy boot prints crossing my porch from all our visitors. I've got nothing left to lose, and now I've got allies. As Margaret's taillights disappeared down my driveway, my phone buzzed with a text. An unknown number had sent a photo of my barn taken minutes earlier, with all our cars still parked outside. The message read, "Zoning violation. Unauthorized public gathering on agricultural land. $500 fine. First warning." I smiled and texted back just 2 words. "Bring it. We've been denied access again." Margaret's voice crackled through my phone. I was knee-deep in mud, trying to save what crops remained after the flooding. The county clerk says our petition about the forged documents needs more evidence. I wiped sweat from my forehead, leaving a streak of dirt. Eleanor's people got to them first. Exactly. And worse, the HOA meeting tonight has been moved to a private venue. Members only, with ID checks at the door. I tossed my shovel aside. Then we switched to Plan B. Plan B began at dawn. While Eleanor and her board thought they'd blocked our legal avenues, we divided into teams. Margaret and 3 others headed to the state archives 2 counties over, where older records couldn't be easily manipulated. Mr. Patel and his wife visited elderly former residents who'd sold under pressure, recording their testimonies. The Rodriguez's college-age son, Miguel, a computer science major, offered his technical expertise. My job was the most visible and risky. "You can't be serious," Frank said, watching me unload lumber from my truck. "They'll tear it down again." "Let them try," I replied, checking my permit paperwork. This time I've got county approval and 3 cameras recording 24/7. The new bridge took shape over 3 days. Neighbors stopped by to help, bringing food and extra tools. Unlike my simple functional original, this bridge was built to last and to make a statement. We added decorative railings, solar-powered lights, and a small bench midway across. "It's beautiful," Mrs. Rodriguez said, bringing me lemonade as I finished the final touches. "Eleanor will hate it." I smiled. That's the point. While I worked in plain sight, our other teams made quieter progress. Margaret texted from the archives. "Jackpot. Found original property line surveys from 1967. Their claimed eastern boundary is off by 47 feet. Miguel set up secure communications for our group using encrypted messaging. Better than using regular texts," he explained. "Also, I've been monitoring the HOA website. Found something interesting in their code." He showed me backdated meeting minutes that had been uploaded but hidden from public view. Documents proving the board knew they were exceeding their authority when they demolished my bridge. "Can we use this legally?" I asked. Miguel grinned. "Better. We can prove they knew it was wrong before they did it." By Friday, my bridge was complete, inspected and officially approved by the county. I placed a hand-carved sign at the entrance. "Marshall Crossing, all welcome." A direct challenge to Eleanor's exclusionary tactics. The response came faster than expected. Diane, my smirking neighbor, appeared at the bridge with 2 board members and a private security guard. "This structure violates Covenant 7.3, she announced, thrusting papers at me. "Remove it within 24 hours or face legal consequences." I didn't touch the papers. "This bridge is fully permitted by the county on land that official surveys confirm is my property. Your covenant doesn't apply here." "We'll see about that," the security guard growled, stepping forward. I pointed to the cameras. "Everything's being recorded, including the fact that you're currently trespassing." They retreated, but I knew it wasn't over. That evening, I received notice of an emergency HOA meeting called specifically to address boundary enforcement procedures. "They're planning something big," Margaret warned when I called her. "My contact at City Hall says Eleanor's husband pulled permits for heavy equipment tomorrow, listed for drainage work." I made my decision. Time to accelerate the plan. "Tell everyone," Potluck at my farm tomorrow. 4 p.m. Word spread quickly. By mid-afternoon Saturday, cars lined my driveway, each crossing my new bridge. Families brought folding tables and chairs. Children played tag between hay bales. The Patels set up a spectacular buffet featuring both American classics and Indian specialties. From my porch, I watched Eleanor's silver Mercedes screech to a halt across the creek. She stormed to the water's edge, face contorted with rage at the sight of so many unauthorized visitors enjoying themselves on what she considered her turf. "This is an illegal gathering," she shouted, her voice barely carrying over the festive noise. "You're violating noise ordinances and safety codes." I walked calmly across my bridge to meet her. "This is a private social event on private property. Every car is legally parked. Every person invited. You can't just..." "Can't what? Have friends over? This isn't Sycamore Heights, Eleanor. Your rules don't apply here." Her eyes narrowed. "I've tolerated your stubbornness long enough. This ends now." She pulled out her phone, dialing rapidly. "Security? I need immediate assistance at the Marshall property line." What Eleanor didn't see was Mrs. Rodriguez's brother, James, circulating through the crowd with his press badge partially hidden. As the regional newspaper's investigative reporter, he'd been collecting stories from attendees all afternoon. I smiled. "Before your security arrives, you might want to meet our other guest." On cue, a county sheriff's car pulled up. Deputy Wilson stepped out, tipping his hat to me. "Mr. Marshall, Ms. Harrington." He nodded to each of us. "I understand there's a property dispute?" Eleanor straightened, instantly switching to her public persona. "Officer, this man is hosting unauthorized commercial events that violate multiple zoning regulations." The deputy looked around at the families eating and children playing. "Looks like a neighborhood cookout to me." "These people aren't neighbors," Eleanor insisted. "They don't live here." "Actually," Margaret interrupted, approaching with a folder, "many of us are rightful property owners whose land has been improperly claimed by Sycamore Heights HOA through falsified documents." She handed the deputy copies of our evidence. The original surveys, the forged signatures, the backdated meeting minutes. Eleanor's face drained of color. "Those are private HOA records. They were illegally obtained. Falsifying property documents is a criminal offense," Deputy Wilson said, flipping through the pages. "These allegations are serious." "They're lying," Eleanor hissed. "My husband is a respected developer. We built Sycamore Heights from nothing." "Built it on stolen land," Frank called out, joining us with his water district maps, "and illegally diverted waterways to damage adjacent properties." More neighbors gathered, each adding their testimony. The security guards Eleanor had called arrived but hung back uncertainly, witnessing the tide turning. James stepped forward, recorder in hand. "Ms. Harrington, would you care to comment on allegations that your husband's development company has systematically used HOA regulations to force property sales below market value?" "Who are you?" she demanded. He held up his press credentials. "James Rodriguez, Metro Daily News. We're running an investigative series next week on HOA overreach. Your situation here provides a compelling case study." Eleanor's composure cracked completely. "This is a coordinated attack, a conspiracy against progress. These people want to keep their dilapidated properties and eyesore farms instead of embracing improvement." Her words hung in the air, recorded by multiple devices. Deputy Wilson closed his folder. "Ms. Harrington, I'd advise you to contact your attorney. I'll be forwarding these documents to the county prosecutor's office for review." Eleanor's phone rang. She stepped away to answer it, her face growing increasingly pale. When she returned, her voice was ice. "This isn't over, Marshall. Not by a long shot." As she stormed back to her car, I turned to find the entire gathering watching in silence. "What happened?" Margaret asked. "First blood," I replied. "But she's right about one thing, this isn't over. It's just beginning." James approached, recorder still running. "Care to tell me the whole story from the beginning? About a certain bridge that started it all?" Behind us, Children raced across that very bridge, laughing in the golden afternoon light. Deputy Wilson was examining our evidence with Frank and Margaret. Neighbors who'd been strangers a week ago now stood united, sharing food and hope. I looked directly into James's recorder. It was never really about the bridge. It was about standing your ground when someone tries to bully you off it. As the words left my mouth, a distant rumble of engines caught everyone's attention. At the far edge of Sycamore Heights, a line of construction vehicles was moving into position. "What now?" Deputy Wilson asked, noticing my expression. I pointed toward the machinery. "Eleanor's final play. If she can't force us out legally, she'll try to do it another way." Margaret finished, her face grim. The battle lines were drawn. Our evidence was strong, but Eleanor controlled the machinery and had nothing left to lose. My hands shook as I opened the newspaper. There it was, front page, HOA president caught in massive land grab scheme. The reporter had used every bit of evidence we'd gathered. Photos of my destroyed bridge. Maps showing how Eleanor had slowly taken over land that wasn't hers. Copies of the fake violation notices she'd sent to scare people into selling their homes cheap. "Your phone's going crazy," Margaret said, sliding a cup of coffee across my kitchen table. 43 messages and 17 missed calls lit up my screen. Neighbors I'd never even met were texting. "We had no idea. They took our gazebo too. Can we join your group?" The reporter called next. "This story's exploding online," she said. "People from 5 other neighborhoods have come forward with similar stories about Eleanor." By noon, TV news vans lined my driveway. I hadn't planned to become the face of an anti-HOA movement, but there I was, standing by my broken bridge, telling my story to cameras. "All I wanted was to keep farming the land my grandfather left me," I explained. "I never thought I'd uncover a scheme this big." Eleanor's husband called that afternoon. His voice oozed fake friendliness. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. We could make this all go away. Name your price for the farm, any price." "It's not for sale," I replied. "Not for any amount." He wasn't used to hearing no. His tone hardened. "You've made a powerful enemy today. We have friends in high places." Those high places weren't as high as he thought. By evening, county investigators had frozen all permits for his development company. Environmental officials arrived with drones, photographing where they'd illegally changed the creek's path to flood my fields. My alliance grew stronger. The Rodriguezes set up a website documenting all HOA abuses. Margaret started helping people file legal claims. The Patels organized a community meeting that filled the town hall. That's when we discovered Eleanor's biggest secret. Property records showed she didn't just run the HOA. She'd created it herself, writing rules specifically designed to force people out. She'd invented violations, levied impossible fines, then swooped in to rescue desperate homeowners by buying their properties at half price. I thought the exposure would stop her. I was wrong. Just after midnight, a deafening crash jolted me awake. Looking outside, I couldn't believe my eyes. Eleanor herself sat at the controls of a bulldozer, smashing through my newly rebuilt bridge, laughing like a movie villain. "You think some newspaper story can stop me?" she screamed when she saw me watching. "I built Sycamore Heights. I own the county planning board. Your little farm will be a parking lot by summer." I quietly pressed record on my phone, capturing her entire meltdown. She was so busy destroying my property, she didn't notice the flash of red and blue lights approaching from the road. "Your property line ends 30 feet back," called a voice through a megaphone. The sheriff stepped from his car, followed by 2 deputies. "And you're operating heavy machinery without permits, at midnight, on someone else's land." Eleanor's face twisted with rage. "Do you know who my husband is? He funds your department's budget." The sheriff just smiled. "Not anymore, he doesn't. Step down from the bulldozer, ma'am." Instead, Eleanor revved the engine, turning the machine toward my house. "If I can't have this land, nobody will." The deputies rushed forward, but they weren't fast enough. The bulldozer lurched toward my home, where my family photos, my grandfather's tools, and a century of memories waited. Could I stop her before she destroyed everything I had left? Blood pounded in my ears as Eleanor aimed the bulldozer at my farmhouse. Without thinking, I sprinted toward the creek, waving my arms and shouting to draw her attention away from my home. It worked too well. She swung the machine toward me instead, its metal treads churning up my soil. "You've ruined everything," she screamed over the engine's roar. Just as the bulldozer reached the creek's edge, the ground beneath it, saturated from her own water diversion, gave way. The massive machine tilted sideways, sinking into mud. Eleanor's triumphant expression melted into panic as she scrambled from the cab, only to be met by the sheriff's deputies. "Eleanor Harrington, you're under arrest," the sheriff announced, listing charges that took nearly a minute to complete. As they led her away, she locked eyes with me. "This isn't over. My lawyers will bury you." But she underestimated what happens when a community unites against a bully. The next morning, my phone rang at dawn. "Turn on Channel 5, Margaret urged. Eleanor's husband, flanked by lawyers, stood before cameras outside their mansion. "My wife acted alone," he claimed, distancing himself from her crimes. "I had no knowledge of her activities with the HOA. Their empire crumbled fast after that. With Eleanor in jail and her husband turning against her, their financial records spilled open. Bank statements proved they'd purchased 11 homes at slashed prices after manufactured HOA violations. Email trails showed they'd planned to buy 6 more, including my farm, to build luxury condos. The district attorney called me personally. "We've never seen a scheme this elaborate," she said. "Your evidence broke this case wide open." 3 weeks later, I stood in a packed courtroom as Eleanor and her husband faced the judge. Both pleaded not guilty, blaming each other and their board members. The judge wasn't fooled. "The court finds substantial evidence of fraud, criminal property damage, environmental violations, and conspiracy," he announced. "Additionally, all properties acquired through these unlawful means must be offered back to their original owners at purchase price." Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones toward me. "How does it feel to take down an entire HOA empire?" "I never wanted a fight," I answered honestly. "I just wanted to keep my family's farm and rebuild my bridge." The real work began after the trial. The Sycamore Heights residents held emergency meetings to decide their neighborhood's future. I surprised myself by attending, though my property remained independent. "We still need some basic rules," argued Diane, my once smirking neighbor. "Without standards, this place will turn into a junkyard. Rules should help people, not hurt them," I countered. "What if instead of focusing on what neighbors can't do, we focus on how we can support each other?" To my amazement, people applauded. A new committee formed, with the Rodriguezes, the Patels, and even Diane agreeing to serve. Their first act? Dismantling most of Eleanor's ridiculous regulations. On a brilliant Saturday 6 months later, 30 neighbors gathered at my creek. Together, we built a new bridge wider and stronger than any before. Children painted colorful handprints along the railings. The Patels brought samosas. The Rodriguezes supplied music. Even Diane contributed handmade signs marking the trail that now connected our neighborhoods. "I was wrong about you," she admitted, handing me a lemonade, "and about what makes a neighborhood valuable." The newspaper ran a follow-up story, "From Division to Connection. Community rebuilds after HOA scandal." The photos showed kids from both sides of the creek playing together, neighbors sharing food, and me, standing in the middle of our new bridge, finally at peace. Eleanor's husband eventually sold their mansion and moved away. Eleanor herself received a 5-year sentence, with additional civil penalties that would take decades to pay off. Last Tuesday, the county office called. "The Harringtons' fraudulent property line adjustments have been reversed," they explained. "Your farm is now officially recognized at its original boundaries." Yesterday, Margaret joined me on the bridge as fireflies began to sparkle over the creek. "You know what's amazing?" she said. "None of this would have happened if they hadn't torn down your first bridge." I smiled, watching my neighbor's children catch lightning bugs in jars. Some things need to be broken before they can be rebuilt properly. As twilight deepened, I realized something profound. In trying to destroy my connection to this land, Eleanor had accidentally created countless new connections between people who might never have met otherwise. She tried to build an empire of walls and rules, but instead we'd built bridges, literal and figurative, that would stand for generations. And that's worth every splinter, every flood, and every fight it took to get here.